28 September 2021. It was a group stage match between PSG and Manchester City in Paris. PSG won the match by 2-0. But if you had given a little attention to it, there was another match going on. Not only on the football pitch, but at a bigger stage. One club that is owned by the state of Qatar, and another owned by the state of the UAE. Nowadays, one club wears a kit sponsored by Qatar Airways, and another wears a kit sponsored by Etihad Airways. These kind of matches weren't usual, but in the last decade, it started happening so often. Football fans had given a special name to these, Oil Clasico. This is a story of powerful regimes, insane geopolitics behind owning a football club, and how they use them for sports washing. Let's start with our pioneer of the sports washing, probably the best football club takeover and transformation of all time, the Chelsea and Roman Abramovich story. In 2003, Roman Abramovich took over Chelsea for around $200 million, and since then not a single English club managed to win more trophies than Chelsea. 5 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, and 2 Champions League titles are some of them. The oligarch had spent more than $1.5 billion on the club, breaking transfer records every now and then, signing superstars, hiring elite managers, and remain at the top of the table. Here is something you know about this, and really important. The money that was being pumped to Chelsea was heavily linked with the Russian energy corporation, Gazprom. Gazprom sponsored Champions League since 2012, but due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, this contract was terminated in 2022. Gazprom had also sponsored German football club Schalke for around $150 million since 2007. It wasn't any normal sponsorship, but there are some geopolitical reasons behind it. Germany imports more than half of its natural gas from Russia through these under-the-sea pipelines. And who's supplying them? You guessed it, Gazprom. Germany is one of the biggest consumers of Gazprom, and for Gazprom, the holding on to the German market is so important. That's why. What would be a better idea than sponsoring its most popular sports league? Which not only is going to maintain a good relationship with Germany, but also create a good public image of Russia. Wait, what? A good public image of Russia? Gazprom is a private energy company, right? Well, on paper, yes, but more than half of its stake is owned by the Russian state. So at the end, Russia is sponsoring football in Germany. In 2011, Vladimir Putin himself tried to stop the transfer of Manuel Neuer to Bayer. What if he succeeded? Can you imagine Bayern without Neuer? So, Gazprom fueled money to Chelsea, sponsored the Champions League and also German football. Wait, there's more. Gazprom also bought Russian football club Zenit St. Petersburg in 2005. Since then, it has dominated the Russian Football League. Well, no doubt is there. CEO of Gazprom, Alexei Miller, happens to be the vice president of the Russian Football Federation. The Russian bid of hosting the 2018 FIFA World Cup in 2010. Guess who was in the Russian bidding committee? Bunch of Gazprom employees. Russia successfully won the bid and hosted the 2018 FIFA World Cup, but later we found that Russian Football Federation has bribed FIFA's 2 or 3 executive committee members to vote for Russia, which also is later acknowledged by Vladimir Putin. There were also 3 bids from other nations to host the World Cup. England, a joint bid from the Netherlands and Belgium, and Spain and Portugal. If you follow football, you know just how big football is in these countries, in terms of history, popularity, infrastructure, players, fans, and madness. But it was a big surprise that Russia was selected ahead of these football giants to host the 2018 FIFA World Cup. Now let's move to the Middle East, where the case is pretty much similar to Russia in terms of oil and gas. Let's start with this tiny country of Qatar. The host announcement of both FIFA World Cups 2018 and 2022 were at the same time in December of 2010 here in Switzerland in FIFA's headquarters. Now we know that Russia bribed 2 or 3 members of FIFA Executive Committee. Qatar was way ahead of Russia. They knew at the time if Qatar wants to win the bid, they have to do something extraordinary. At the time, in 2010, Qatar, a company with only around 200,000 people, had only one football stadium. Australia, United States, Japan, and South Korea also made a bid to host the 2022 World Cup. Let's be honest now, all of these countries were way ahead of Qatar in terms of sports and particularly football at that time. No one even believed that a deserted peninsula with such a terrible infrastructure and with few 100,000 people would win a World Cup bid. But it happened anyway. Now the 2022 World Cup is over, and Messi has already lifted the most prestigious trophy of all time, in an Arab attire. Qatar spent over $220 billion since they won the bid. They built an entire metro system from scratch. They built 7 brand new stadiums from scratch. They built new airports, hotels, and entire cities from scratch, just to host a 29-day competition. Turns out in 2010, Qatar bribed not only 1 or 2, but 14. Yes, 14 of executive committee members of FIFA to vote in favor of them. We're not going into details of all of the bribing, except for this one case that stood out the most and was a defining moment of the scandal. Michel Platini, a former French footballer who was the president of UEFA Federation at that time and one of the members of FIFA's executive committee. He admitted afterwards that he was actually going to vote for the United States, until a week before the voting when he was invited by the French president Nicolas Sarkozy to his place. And just look at the coincidence, who was also there. These 2 Qatari guys. Exactly what happened in the meeting is not clear to us, but after this meeting, something happened between France and Qatar. Qatar Airways brought 50 planes from Airbus, a French airplane company. The deal, which was worth about $15 billion. And Qatar also bought a French football club, Paris Saint-Germain, for $60 million. And we don't have to talk about PSG now. We all know how big the PSG has become over the last decade. It has the second most valuable squad in football right now for individuals like Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar. And in exchange of it, Qatar got the vote of Michel Platini. And by this similar way, Qatar ended up buying 13 other votes. This was the miserable story of how Qatar used football, just by flowing tons and tons of money into it. Now let's move to Qatar's neighbors, the UAE. In 2008, Sheikh Mansour, the Deputy Prime Minister of UAE, bought Manchester City for $350 million. It's an incredible story, isn't it? Since then, Man City has become the powerhouse of the European football, winning Premier League 6 times, 4 times in just the last 5 years, breaking transfer records, having the best manager, and having the most valuable squad of all time. Etihad Airways, the UAE-based airlines, happens to be the shirt sponsor of Man City, for around $60 million a year. Sheikh Mansour also founded Abu Dhabi United Group back in 2008, which is the sole owner of the Man City. And it owns 81% stake in the City Football Group, who owns several football clubs around the globe. Now let's move to another neighboring country, which is a relatively newcomer to the board, Saudi Arabia. In October 2021, Newcastle United was taken over by the state of Saudi Arabia. Well, this was not the shocking news, because the Saudis were trying for so long to buy the club, and once they even retracted the offer in June 2020. But in 2021, they finally bought it. Newcastle is now owned by PIF, the Public Investment Fund, PCP Capital Partners, and RB Sports and Media. PIF, which is worth around $400 billion, make Newcastle the richest football club in the world. The most important man of this takeover is this guy, Yasser Al-Rumayyan. Turns out he is the governor of the PIF, chairman of Saudi Aramco, and now the chairman of Newcastle United. If you don't know, Saudi Aramco is a Saudi Arabian public petroleum and natural gas corporation, which is also owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And from March 2016, Aramco is under the control of PIF. The reason of this takeover is so simple: to improve the reputation of Saudi Arabia and its crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He has introduced Vision 2030, a framework to reduce Saudi Arabia's dependency on oil, diversify its economy, and develop public service sectors such as health, education, infrastructure, and tourism. But the happening of this much of a development is starting to seem impossible when you see the problems that Saudis are going through. It's human rights violations, gender discrimination, press freedom, oil crisis, assassinations of journalists and opposition leaders, and airstrikes in Yemen. Football has never been this popular before. Now when you see any states or powerful regimes buying a football club, just understand this: they do not care about the trophies in football, the things that they want from it. It's just their reputation in front of the world. And what would be the better way than sponsoring the best sports in the world? Sportswashing helps in cleaning up their crimes and their global image, which will attract rich outsiders and foreign investments. It was never about winning the trophies, and it never will be. It has started to feel more like an advertisement, but with insane geopolitical reasons behind it.